If someone had told me I'd be forced to marry a princess, I would have assumed she'd be cold, distant, and annoyed to see me. The air in the ceremonial hall hung heavy, thick with myrrh and quiet surrender. I stood unmoving, wrapped in silk that felt weightier than any armor. My vision dimmed by a gold-threaded veil that blurred the world, but did nothing to hide me from the hundreds of staring eyes. The murmurs reached me clearly, some laced with pity, most with cruelty. Poor girl, offered up like a sacrifice. She's marrying the Ice Princess. That merciless woman. May the gods spare her. My fingers shook within my gloves, but I kept my hands folded before me, feigning calm. That was the role demanded of Lady Arya Thorne, third daughter of House Thorne, bartered away to secure peace through a marriage born not of affection, but of treaties signed in blood and desperation. Across the polished marble floor waited the woman I was destined to wed. Princess Kaya Winterborn, heir to the kingdom of Wintercrest. The North's unyielding Iron Crown. She was taller than I expected. Cloaked in midnight blue, her silver hair braided intricately around a circlet of onyx. Her expression was unreadable, her posture perfect. Rumors had called her ruthless, unfailing, that she crushed rebellion with a glance, that her heart was as cold as the land she ruled. She was said to have rejected every suitor ever offered. Now she stood at the altar waiting for me. I was barely 19. She was 24 and I had never spoken to her. The high priest called our names, voice echoing through stone. My feet felt frozen to the floor. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted someone, anyone, to pull me out of this. But I moved forward one step at a time until I stood before her. Her eyes met mine. Pale glacial gray, yet somehow not cruel, just guarded. A flicker of something passed across her face when she looked at me. Not disdain, not boredom, something else. I felt the priest intoned. Do you accept this union for the sake of peace, for the protection of your people? My voice caught in my throat. My father's face loomed in my mind, stern and distant. My mother's final words echoed. Be brave, my flower. I do. The priest turned. Princess Kaya Winterborn, do you accept this union for the sake of your kingdom and the bond between our nations? She didn't blink. Her voice was low. Even I do. The sealing spell was spoken. Magic old and binding, coiling around us like invisible vines. A pulse ran through the air as the enchantment took root. We were bound legally, magically, publicly. Two strangers now joined as wives. The crowd applauded, more out of duty than joy. And then we were let out, not hand in hand, but side by side as custom dictated. The cold wind outside slapped my face like a warning. The carriage waited. She gestured for me to enter first, polite, distant, exactly as I feared. The ride to the palace was silent. I stared out the window, pretending the tears stinging my eyes were from the wind. But then, without turning, her voice came soft, deliberate. You're shaking. I flinched. I'm fine. A pause. Then, it's warmer in the center. Sit closer if you wish. I didn't respond, but after a moment, I inched toward her, feeling foolish. She didn't move away. The silence stretched, but it wasn't cold. Not entirely. And then in the quiet, she said something so unexpected, so out of place, I almost thought I imagined it. I never wanted this either, but that doesn't mean I'll be cruel to you. My breath caught. I looked at her. Her gaze was fixed forward, but her jaw was tight. You deserve better than fear, she added. Especially from me. I didn't know what to say. I still didn't trust her. I barely even knew her. But something shifted, just a little enough to make me wonder if the rumors were wrong or if somehow I would be the exception. The palace was nothing like I imagined. From the outside, Castle Frostspire looked carved from winter itself. Silver stone, black spires, sharp edges like icicles captured mid-fall. But inside it was quiet. Not cold exactly, but hushed like even the walls were holding their breath. Servants bowed as we passed, eyes lowered, movement swift and precise. I didn't know whether they feared her or respected her. Maybe both. My fingers were numb from tension by the time we reached the east wing. "This is your wing," Kaya said as she stopped outside an arched door carved with runes I didn't recognize. "You may decorate it as you like. You'll have full privacy here. No one enters without your permission." I blinked. I thought we didn't flinch, but her answer was immediate. "There's no obligation to share a bedchamber." My heart stumbled at her bluntness, though part of me was relieved. And yet there was a strange disappointment hiding beneath it. "Oh, right. We may be wives in title, Lady Arya," she said quietly, "but I will not treat you as property, then softer. I imagine you've been treated like that enough." She turned and walked away before I could answer. I stood there, stunned, the echo of her words threading through my chest. My chambers were beautiful, if sparse. A massive hearth, tall windows draped in navy velvet, a four-poster bed carved from pale oak. A maid entered minutes later, offering warm wine and a bath. I nodded wordlessly. When she left, I stood in front of the mirror, stripped of the ceremonial veil, corset loosened, throat bare. The reflection that stared back at me didn't look like a wife or a noble or anyone I recognized. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the way Kaya had spoken, controlled but not harsh. How she looked at me like I was something fragile, not something to dominate or dismiss. The next morning, I was summoned to the solar where she waited with a document in hand. "A proposal," she said without preamble. "We may live separately, attend functions together when required. You will have freedom to pursue your own interests and no expectations of physical intimacy will be placed upon you." I stared at her. "You want me to sign this?" "Only if you agree. It's not binding, but it's an understanding. Something to ease the nature of this arrangement." "Arrangement?" I echoed. The word stung. "And what about you? What do you get from this?" She hesitated. "Peace, stability, and my counsel's demands that I produce an heir immediately." Her voice turned sharper. "They think marriage will tame me, make me more controllable." "And will it?" Asked before I could stop myself. She met my gaze unblinking. No, I should have been afraid, but instead my chest warmed with something I couldn't name. That evening, I wandered the halls, unable to sit still. The palace was quiet, echoing with candlelight and the distant hum of harp music. I didn't expect to find her in the conservatory alone, playing a violin so softly it was barely more than a whisper. She looked up as I stepped in, surprised. "You play," I said. She lowered the instrument. "Not well. Better than I expected a war princess to play." That earned the ghost of a smile. "And what did you expect me to do in my free time?" "Execute prisoners." I flushed. "No, everyone says you're heartless." "Yes." She set the violin down carefully. "It's easier to let them think that. People don't ask questions when they're afraid of the answers." "And what if I'm not afraid?" I whispered. Silence stretched between us like tension in a boring. Then softly she said, "Then I don't know what to do with you." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there realizing that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one trapped in this marriage who felt like she was holding her breath. 3 days passed. 3 long, oddly quiet days in which I barely saw Kaya. Our paths crossed at breakfast once, where she nodded politely but said nothing more than a greeting. At court, she sat beside me but never addressed me directly, unless protocol demanded it. I wondered if I had imagined the softness in her eyes that night in the conservatory. I wondered if she'd closed herself off again. Behind the walls, people said she built so high no one could ever climb them. Still, the memory of her voice lingered in my mind. "You deserve better than fear." Every time I thought of it, something in my chest fluttered. It was irrational. I had no reason to want her attention. And yet the ache for it grew louder. The palace, though beautiful, felt like a gilded prison. Servants bowed but avoided eye contact. Guards stood silently at every corner. I knew I was being watched, evaluated. My presence here was political, a symbol. I had to look the part, speak the part, behave. I hated how much I longed for a crack in the performance. On the fourth day, a knock came at my chamber door just before dusk. It wasn't a servant. Kaya stood there in her riding clothes, cloak half undone, hair windswept and silver like a storm. "I'm going riding," she said. "Would you like to come?" I blanked me. "You ride, don't you?" Yes, but I wasn't sure. There's no law forbidding it. I didn't know if that was a joke or not, but her expression was unreadable, so I nodded and followed her without a word. The stables were at the edge of the palace grounds. The sky above was turning violet, stir with fire and smoke as the sun dipped low. She led me to a dark gray mare and helped me into the saddle without asking if I needed assistance. We rode in silence at first through snow-dusted trees and along a narrow path that wound past the outer gardens. It was the first time I felt the wind on my face in days. I breathed deeply, letting the cold sting my skin, and for a moment I didn't feel like a prisoner in a golden cage. So glanced at me then. "You look different." I turned to her, startled. Different, less coiled. That's one way to describe anxiety. I muttered and then immediately regretted saying it aloud, but she didn't laugh. I meant it as a compliment. I watched her carefully. "Why did you ask me to come?" "Because I thought you might need air," she said simply. "And because I wanted to see if you'd say yes." "Why?" She was quiet for a beat too long. "Because people rarely say yes to me when it isn't in order." I didn't know what to say to that. We reached a clearing, quiet and empty save for a frozen fountain and the skeletal remains of what must have been summer flowers. Kaya just nodded. I followed. She didn't speak for a while, just looked at the horizon like it held something she hadn't decided to want yet. Finally, she said, "I know this is not the life you imagined." "No," I agreed. "It's not. I will never ask you to love me." That pierced deeper than I expected. "Then what do you want from me?" "Honesty," she said, "even if it's sharp." I turned to her. The wind caught a loose strand of her hair, sweeping it across her cheek. And for the first time, I noticed how tired her eyes looked beneath all that stillness. "And what do you want from me?" I asked, the same. "You think I'm honest?" "You haven't tried to charm me," she said. "Most people do." I laughed softly. I wouldn't even know how. That earned a small smile from her. It changed her whole face. She looked younger, warmer, human. "Good," she said. "I wouldn't trust it if you did." The silence after that wasn't uncomfortable. It settled around us like falling snow. Gentle, cold, but strangely peaceful. When we returned to the palace, my cheeks were flushed, my fingers frozen, but something inside me had thawed. She helped me down from a horse and didn't pull her hand away immediately. Her gloved fingers brushed mine. "You don't have to stay in your wing every night," she said softly. "You're free to walk the palace. Or join me if you want." And then, without waiting for a reply, she turned and disappeared into the shadows. That night, I stood at my window for a long time watching frost form on the glass. I thought about the way her voice had dropped when she spoke to me, about the way her hand lingered, about how she hadn't asked for anything, but left the door open anyway. And I realized I wanted to walk through it, just not yet. But soon the palace changed after that evening. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I was the one changing. Maybe I had stopped bracing for cruelty and started searching for cracks in her armor. For more moments like the one in the frost-dusted clearing when wasn't a title or a crown or the woman I was forced to marry, but simply someone real. Someone guarded, yes, but not unreachable. I didn't see her the next morning nor the day after. But on the third day, a servant brought me a folded note sealed with black wax. It read, "If you're not opposed to the idea of terrible poetry and better wine, I'll be in the library after dusk. No formalities, just company." My hands trembled as I read it again. And again, I told myself I didn't need to go. I owed her nothing. But when dusk came, I found myself crossing the long gallery toward the western wing, heart hammering like I was sneaking into something forbidden. The library was a cathedral of warmth and shadows, floor-to-ceiling shelves, gilded ladders, a massive hearth crackling at its heart. Kaya sat in an alcove near the fire, boots off, hair unbraided, a thick blanket tossed over her lap. She looked up when I entered. "I almost thought you wouldn't come," she said, marking our place in a book. "I almost didn't," I admitted, "but I was curious about your poetry." "Truly awful," she said solemnly, reaching for a folded scrap of parchment. "Do you want to be horrified now or after wine?" I smiled despite myself. "Now get the worst over with." She read aloud, voice theatrical, expression deadpan. Something about a moon that was too judgmental and a heart that hid behind war strategies. I laughed. Actually laughed? And she didn't flinch. She smiled slow and crooked like it surprised her too. "You weren't lying," I said, still breathless. "You really are terrible." "It's a skill," she replied, weaponized mediocrity. She poured us both wine. Not the bitter kind served at court functions, but something deep and dark, like berries and fire. We talked about nothing and everything. Books, old myths, our least favorite nobles, the way she hated embroidery, and how I used to steal honey cakes from the kitchen when I was a child. For the first time, I forgot to be careful. I forgot she was a princess. I forgot I was a bride unwillingly bound. I forgot to be afraid. "You're not what I expected," I told her quietly. Hours later, when the hearth had burned low and the shadows stretched longer, "Good," she said, "because neither are you." There was something in her eyes then. Curious, cautious, like a soldier reaching for a sword, but finding a flower instead. She reached across the space between us and tucked a loose strand of my hair behind my ear. It was the gentlest touch I'd ever known. "You have snow in your hair," she murmured. Though we both knew it had melted long ago, I didn't pull away. I should have. It would have been the safe thing to do. But I stayed still, letting her fingers linger against my cheek. "I don't want to frighten you," she said. "You don't," I whispered. "Not anymore." Her hand dropped slowly, like she regretted the distance already. She stood, gathered the blanket, and said, "You can stay if you like." "I won't touch you." "I just don't want to be alone tonight." I hesitated only a moment. Then I followed her to the settee near the hearth where we lay back to back close, but not touching. I could feel the warmth of her body through the space between us. Her breathing was steady, safe. I didn't sleep much, but for the first time since arriving, I didn't feel like a guest in a foreign life. I felt like I was being allowed to exist. The next morning, I woke before her. Her hair had fallen across the pillow, silver and soft, and I watched her for a moment, surprised by how unguarded she looked in sleep. Vulnerable, not heartless, not even close. I slipped out before she stirred, heart aching with something I didn't know how to name. That day, the guards didn't avoid my gaze. The servants bowed with a little more warmth. Something was changing, and they could see it too. That night, there was no note, but I found myself standing outside her chambers anyway, hand raised to knock before lowering it again. Not yet, but soon. The days that followed were quieter, but never empty. Something lingered in the air between us now, a thread invisible to everyone else, but one I could feel tugging at me every time I entered a room. We still kept our distance in public, upholding the appearance of a political alliance and little more. But the truth was blooming quietly behind closed doors. We shared meals on the solar, often in comfortable silence, sometimes trading stories or glances that lasted too long. She started asking questions, not just polite ones, but personal ones about my sisters, my childhood, the garden I missed at home. And I answered, not all at once, not fully, but enough that she started to see me not as a symbol, not as a duty, but as I saw her, not as a weapon, not as the ice princess they warned me about, but as a woman shaped by walls she had to build, one stone at a time. On the sixth night, the silence in the palace changed. A storm gathered in the mountains. The wind howled like something ancient, something mourning. My chambers were too large, too cold. I wrapped myself in a shawl and wandered the halls without direction, led by instinct more than thought. I found her on the battlement, cloak billowing in the wind, face turned to the night sky as snowflakes spiraled around her. "You'll freeze out here," I said. She didn't turn. "It reminds me I'm alive." I moved closer. "That's a dramatic way of saying you like snow." She finally looked at me, a faint smile tugging at her mouth. "You came. You knew I would." Her gaze softened. "I hoped." She didn't reach for me. Didn't close the space, but something in her expression made me feel like she wanted to. "When I was 14, she said suddenly, my father gave me a sword instead of a cake on my name day. He said, 'Daughters of the North must learn to carve their place into the world.'" I blinked. "That's brutal." "It was," she said, "but I didn't mind the sword." Her tone shifted. It was the lesson that came after, which was that softness is weakness. That mercy is danger. That affection is a blade others can turn against you. She looked at me, her voice low. "You make me question that." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My heart was hammering too loudly. She stepped closer. The snow clung to her lashes. "I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you didn't choose this, but I also know I've started to care. And that terrifies me more than war." My breath caught. The wind howled again, and I suddenly hated it for making her voice harder to hear, for trying to drown out the one thing I'd been craving without realizing. "Kaya," I whispered. She looked at me like she thought I might run, but I didn't. I stepped forward slow, uncertain. Her breath hitched. She didn't move. And I kissed her not because I had to, not because of duty, but because I wanted to, because something in me needed to. Her lips were cold from the wind, but she kissed me back like she'd been holding that desire in her chest for years, not days. When we finally pulled apart, her forehead rested against mine. "That was a terrible idea," she whispered. "I know," I said, "but I'm glad we had it anyway." She laughed soft and real, and I wanted to hold that sound in my hands. We didn't go back to our rooms. We went to the conservatory instead. The fire was still warm. The air smelled of jasmine and frost. We sat close, knees touching, and talked until the sky began to lighten. She told me how she had once dreamed of running away to sea. I told her about the book I tried to write when I was 12, and how terrible it was. She promised to find it and read it aloud. I promised I'd die before letting her. The closeness between us stopped being fragile. It stopped being terrifying. It started becoming real. The next morning, the council summoned us. Kaya stood tall beside me, unreadable as always, but her hand brushed mine once beneath the table, brief and silent. They spoke of errors of duty of ensuring the bloodlines continued. The pressure was subtle but sharp. She didn't speak until they were finished. And then calmly she said, "My wife and I will decide what we want when we want it. This discussion is closed." No one dared argue. I didn't say anything until we were alone. "That was bold," I said. "So are you?" she replied. I smiled. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was pretending to be brave. I was because of her, because of us. The snow kept falling for days. It layered the palace rooftops like frosting, muffled the sounds of hooves in the courtyards, turned the stone balconies into frostbitten thresholds. But inside our shared silence, warmth bloomed. Not suddenly, not all at once, but steadily like the slow thaw of spring beneath deep winter. We didn't speak of the kiss, not directly, but something shifted after it, an ease between us that hadn't existed before. The glances lasted longer. The touches were less hesitant. She sat closer when we dined. I stopped pretending not to stare when she read with her knees pulled to her chest and her lips pursed in focus. One night, as we walked along the inner garden cloister, bare vines curled against frozen columns, I reached for her hand without thinking. She didn't flinch. She looked down, surprised maybe, but then laced her fingers through mine with quiet certainty. "Do you regret it?" I asked her softly, not looking at her. The marriage? She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then I regret the reason for it, but not this. She squeezed my hand. Not you. That night, I didn't return to my wing. I followed her to her chambers, not because she asked, but because I wanted to. The guards didn't even blink. The doors closed behind us with a soft click, and suddenly the silence wasn't peaceful. It was charged. She turned to face me in the dim light. Her hair was loose again, and there was a question in her eyes. I wasn't sure I was ready to answer, but I stepped closer. My fingers found the hem of her sleeve. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. Then we'll learn together, she said. The first time we undressed each other, it wasn't perfect. There were nerves, laughter, long pauses where we just stood still, breathing in the same space like it was new air. She touched me like I was something she'd never let herself believe she deserved. I kissed her like she was something I never thought I could want. And when we finally lay in her bed, skin against skin, hearts pounding like thunder, it wasn't about power or politics or promises. It was about choice, about presence, about the terrifying beauty of being seen. We didn't speak much after. Just lay tangled in silence, her fingers tracing idle lines over my arm, her breath steady against my neck. You're not afraid, she murmured eventually. Not of you, I replied. Not anymore. I felt her lips press to my shoulder. You terrify me, she said quietly. Why? Because I don't know how to protect myself from this. I turned toward her. Then don't. Morning came too soon. Gold sunlight slanting through her windows, turning the silver in her hair to white fire. She was already awake, watching me. You stayed, she said. I will again if you'll let me. She didn't smile. Not really. But her eyes held something deeper than joy, relief, reverence. The next days blurred. We fell into a rhythm. Half lovers, half something unnamed. We didn't talk about love. We didn't need to. It was there in the way she reached for my hand when no one was looking. In the way I woke to find her already watching me like she couldn't believe I was still real. In the way she began to laugh more. In the way I began to sleep without nightmares. The court noticed. Whispers followed me down hallways. The servants watched me with a new kind of curiosity, but no one dared say a word against it. Not with the way Kea looked at me. Not with the way her tone shifted when she said my name, like it was no longer a political term, but something precious. And then came the letter. It arrived by a raven marked with a valley crest. My father's hand. I hadn't seen it since the day I left home. I opened it with shaking fingers, expecting cold orders or calculated praise. Instead, I found 2 lines. You are serving your purpose well. The North is quiet. Ensure it remains that way. That was all. No inquiry into my well-being. No acknowledgement of the woman I was becoming. Just duty as always. I crumpled the letter and set it in the hearth. It burned fast. Kaya watched me silently from across the room. When I turned, she asked only one question. Do you want to write back? No, I said. I'm done asking for his approval. She nodded once slowly, but her eyes were darker than usual. He sees you as a tool. He always has. Then let me show you something else. That night, she took me not to the bedroom, but to the map room. It was empty, save for a long table scattered with charts and ancient text. She pointed to the wall, a tapestry I hadn't noticed before. A depiction of 2 queens, hand in hand, ruling together. They ruled over a golden age, she said. 2 women, no heirs, no bloodline legacy, just peace, prosperity, and the loyalty of their people. I stared. Why are you showing me this? Because history forgets what doesn't fit its narrative. But I remember, and I want to build something like that with you. If you'll stay, if you'll want more than just survival. I reached for her hand. I want more with you. Her breath hitched just a little. She squeezed my hand. Then let's write our own history. The moment we said it, let's write our own history. Something in me shifted. Not like a door opening, but like a chain breaking. For the first time, I didn't feel like a pawn or a symbol. I didn't feel like someone surviving a story written by others. I felt like someone standing at the start of something real, something terrifying, something that might finally belong to me, to us. That night, as Kaya slept with one arm draped over my waist, I stared at the ceiling and whispered the word ours under my breath. It tasted strange, warm, dangerous. The next days passed in quiet revolution. We didn't announce anything to the court. We didn't have to. It was in the way she walked beside me instead of ahead. The way I no longer avoided the stares of the council or the nobles. The way the servants began to bow just a little deeper when I entered a room. Not because I was feared, but because I was seen. Whispers followed us like shadows, but none dared speak them aloud. I was no longer a Thorn daughter in exile. I was a Dareth princess by name and something far more dangerous by presence. Still, power doesn't shift without resistance, and ours came quietly in the form of silk-wrapped invitations. The annual gathering of the Four Realms was scheduled for the end of the month. A diplomatic tradition where the kingdom sent representatives to reaffirm treaties, assess alliances, and exchange favors behind smiles and veiled threats. This year, it was to be held in Wintercrest in her home. Kaya's jaw tightened when she read the scroll. They'll want to see us together. Watch us evaluate our bond. Let them, I said. You're not afraid. I've been afraid all my life, I replied. It hasn't protected me. You have. She looked at me like she didn't believe she'd earned that kind of trust. But she didn't deny it either. Your family will be there. My stomach turned. I know. Will you speak to them? I haven't decided. If they try to shame you, then I'll show them who I became without them. I kissed her before she could argue, and for the first time she didn't hesitate. The preparations for the gathering transformed the palace. Silk banners in deep blue and silver were hung from the towers. Kitchens bustled, guards doubled, diplomats arrived in pairs and trios, each cloaked in titles and ambitions. I wore a navy gown threaded with threads of starlight, chosen not for beauty, but for power. Kaya's crest, black wolf on a silver field, was pinned over my heart. I saw them before they saw me. My father's face was exactly as I remembered it, stern, sculpted, cold. My eldest sister, Selenia, stood beside him, her eyes sharp and assessing. When they spotted me on the high D's beside Kaya, their expressions froze. I didn't flinch. Kaya didn't touch me, but she stood closer than custom demanded. It was enough. The evening unfolded in a blur of toasts and pleasantries, veiled insults and strategic compliments. I watched Kaya navigate it all with brutal elegance, every nod calculated, every smile edged with steel. And when the moment finally came, when my father approached with a goblet in hand and a voice as polished as ever, I was ready. Lady Arya, he said loud enough for others to hear. You look comfortable. It's Princess now, I replied, matching his tone. And yes, I am. His eyes narrowed. Your mother would have been proud. She would have hoped for kindness, I said. But I think she would have been proud of what I became. Selenia stepped forward. You've changed. So have you, I said. But only one of us learned how to stop hiding cruelty behind duty. Kaya's hand brushed mine under the table. I didn't need to look at her to know she was proud. The next days of the gathering passed in a blur of strategy and spectacle, but behind closed doors, something else stirred. Late one night, Kaya returned from a council meeting with shadows in her eyes. I was already in her chambers, curled beneath the blanket she always said was too soft for royalty. She sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers clenched. They're pressuring me to name a successor, she said. Artie. They fear that this marriage means I will not produce an heir. That I've chosen you instead of duty. Haven't you? I asked quietly. She looked at me like she was choosing her words with painful precision. I have, but they want blood lineage a future they can control. I sat up, heart tightening. What will you do? I told them the future is being rewritten. She said, and they can either learn to read it or be left behind. My breath caught. You said that. I did. And they're furious, but they'll fall in line. They always do. I touched her face gently. You shouldn't have to fight this alone. I'm not alone, she whispered. Not anymore. The gathering ended with a final banquet. Kaya stood and raised a toast, her voice clear and commanding. To peace not forged by tradition, but by choice, to alliances not of blood, but of will, and to those who have the courage to build new stories, even when the world clings to the old. The room fell silent and then applause, hesitant at first, then louder. Some stood, others didn't, but it didn't matter. We had spoken our truth, and they had heard it. That night, as we lay tangled together, whispered, "They'll come for us." You know that. Let them, I said. I didn't marry a princess to live quietly. I married you to live freely. Her arms tightened around me, and for the first time, I felt not like a girl pretending to be brave, but a woman who had finally chosen her power. We thought the storm would come with armies, with steel against stone, with banners torn by wind and fire. But it came quietly, like wrought beneath polished wood, like poison in a silver goblet. It began with a servant who went missing, then a letter stolen from the map room. A rider intercepted on the road to the southern border. Kaya kept her face calm, her tone cool, but I could see it in her eyes. The weight of a threat gathering just beyond the veil of diplomacy. They're not challenging us directly, she said one morning as she paced in the war chamber. But they're watching, probing, looking for weakness. Then we don't give them any. I said, we show them we're stronger together than they ever expected. Arya, this is not just about power, she warned. It's about legacy, about people who would rather tear the kingdom apart than see it ruled by two women who dared to love without asking permission. I stepped toward her, catching her hand, then let them try. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. Her fingers tightened around mine. If anything happens to you, it won't. You don't know that? No, I said, but I know what we're building is worth the risk. That night, we increased the guards around our chambers. We held our council meetings in private, trusting only a select few. And still I could feel it, the palace breathing differently, doors closing faster, whispers lingering longer. One evening, a noble woman from the southern court pulled me aside after dinner. Lady Kestrel. Her smile was polished, but her words were knives. You've stirred quite the storm, princess. There are many who wonder what enchantments you've used to make her forget her duty. No enchantments, I said calmly. Just truth. And perhaps a kind of love you don't believe in. Love, she repeated like the word disgusted her. You've made her soft, and yet she still stands, I said. Stronger than any man here? For now, Lady Kestrel murmured. But everything soft burns eventually. She left before I could reply. I didn't tell Kaya, not that night. She already had too many weights on her shoulders. But I slept restlessly. And when I woke to find her holding me tighter than usual, I knew she'd felt it too. The tension, the shift, the danger coiling beneath our walls. 2 days later, the attack came. Not with swords or flame, but with ink. A falsified decree was sent to the northern garrison, stamped with Kaya's seal and forged signature, commanding the troops to march against the southern province. It almost ignited a civil war. Only her direct intervention stopped the bloodshed. She rode through the night to intercept the soldiers and returned at dawn, pale, furious, the forged order crushed in her hand. Someone is trying to frame us, she said, voice tight. Trying to tear the realm apart from the inside. Who? I asked. I don't know, she whispered. But they're close. Too close. I watched her pace, fury simmering just beneath her carefully held control. We need to be careful, I said. If they want to watch you fall, then we show them what it looks like when we rise instead. She looked at me then as if I were the only solid ground left beneath her feet. I don't know how I ever ruled without you. I gave a faint smile. You didn't. You just survived it. We spent the next week closing every gap in our defenses, scrutinizing each member of the inner court, checking every order, every scroll, every rumor. Kaya's mind was a weapon honed to a razor's edge. I watched her slice through lies with terrifying precision, and I stayed with her, not trailing in her shadow, but standing at her side. Gradually, the court began to shift again. Slowly, they stopped seeing us merely as wives and started seeing us as a force. Until one night, during a raging snowstorm, a message arrived that shattered the fragile balance we'd been rebuilding. A letter brought by an unnamed courier, sealed in black wax, bearing no crest. Inside, a single sentence, written in dark, blood-colored ink. The princess bleeds like any other. Kaya went utterly still as she read it. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, she passed it to me. My hand shook as I took it. "They're threatening you," I said. "Or you," she replied. "We don't know which princess they mean." "Then we stay together," I said. "We guard each other." "No," she said softly. "We find them first." From that moment, everything changed. Kaya summoned her most trusted spy master, a woman named Mira Sharp, as glass and twice as dangerous. Mira bowed to me as if she already understood who I was, not by title, but by what I had become in this place. "Your presence," she said, "has made her dangerous in a new way. Is that a warning?" I asked. "No," she replied. "It's a compliment." The investigation unfolded in silence and shadow. Mira drifted through the palace like smoke, chasing rumors, unearthing secrets buried so long they had begun to rot. While she hunted in the dark corners of our world, I remained beside Kaya in the light. Every public appearance was calculated, every gesture, every phrase chosen to project unity, command, fearlessness. In private, we were exhausted, frayed, furious. We held on to each other like lifelines in a storm. One night, after an endless council session, I found Kaya alone in the map room, staring once more at the tapestry of the two queens. "I'm tired," she said quietly. "Not of the politics, not of the enemies, but of holding all of this without knowing if I'm allowed to want happiness." "Then rest with me," I said. "Just for tonight." She did. In my arms, in our bed, no crowns, no guards, no strategies for war. Only skin warmth, shared breaths in the dark. I pressed a kiss to her shoulder and whispered, "I would bleed for you." Her eyes shone. "I'd kill for you," she answered. "But I'd rather build for you." "Then let's survive this," I said. "No," she replied. "Let's win." The palace had never felt so quiet, not empty, but alert, as though the stone itself understood we were being hunted. Every step of a servant echoed too loudly. Every creak of a door made my pulse spike. Even the snowfall outside seemed hushed, as if the world were holding its breath. Mira moved like a living shadow, speaking only when necessary, disappearing for hours, sometimes days, before returning with scraps of information and half-formed truths. Each time she stepped back into our chambers, Kaya would rise, tall and dangerous, braced for a blow. But steel was not what she needed. Not yet. What she needed was patience. And that was the costliest thing of all. "They're inside the palace," Mira said one night, voice low and exact as she spread a map across our table. "Someone with direct access to your personal seal. Likely a member of your council." Kaya's jaw tightened. "Give me names." "Not yet, but soon." I watched Kaya stare at the ink markings, her eyes scanning them like a battlefield. "They want to frame us. Destabilize the realm from within. If we fall, the alliances fall. The provinces fracture. War breaks without a sword ever being drawn. Which is why we won't fall," I said. Mira looked at me then, not with pity, not with doubt, but with calculation. And maybe something like respect. "You should keep her close," she said to Kaya. "They've threatened her once. They'll try again." "They won't touch her," Kaya said. "Not while I'm alive." "That's what I'm afraid of," Mira replied. Later that night, Kaya and I sat in front of the hearth in silence. I reached for her hand. She didn't flinch, but her grip was tight, her fingers trembling. "You're not sleeping," I said. "Neither are you." I'm afraid if I close my eyes, the world will change without warning. She looked at me, eyes shining in the firelight. It already has. She touched my cheek gently. Do you regret it? What, us? I shook my head, not for a heartbeat. She leaned in then, forehead pressed to mine. Breath soft against my lips. I used to think I'd die alone, she whispered. And that was fine, easier. But now I've tasted this, tasted you, and I know I'd burn down kingdoms to keep you safe. Then you'd better start laying matches, I whispered back. The first real break came 3 days later. Mara intercepted a coded letter in the southern stables, one meant to leave by courier before sunrise. The seal was faint, barely visible in the candlelight, but recognized it instantly. House Kestrel, the same woman who'd smiled at me like she could see straight through my skin. The letter was addressed not to a foreign power, but to someone here, someone named V. Mira. I asked the moment I read it. No, she said coldly. They're mocking me. The message was short. She's softer than she looks. We can use that. The union is fragile. All we need is one more crack. Kaya stared at the words for a long time before setting them into the flames. Enough, she said. It's time we set the trap. The plan was simple. We would stage a rift. A performance. One the court couldn't ignore. One that would invite our enemies to move. You'll have to play the part well, she told me as we prepared. You may hate me by the end of it. Not possible, I said. Just don't enjoy yelling at me too much. The next morning, the palace awoke to the sound of raised voices. Kaya's fury echoed through the halls, calculated, rehearsed, but terrifyingly real. I answered with cold attachment, chin high, spine straight, eyes like ice. If this marriage is nothing more than strategy to you, I shouted as we passed the East Corridor. Then perhaps it should end. Then walk away, she snapped loud enough for the guards to hear. Go back to your father. If he'll take you. I flinched. That line hadn't been in the plan. Later, she would tell me she regretted it instantly, that it slipped out like an old wound bleeding open. But I didn't break character. I turned cold and proud and said, Then I will. The whole palace heard it. By dusk, the court was in chaos. Rumors flew like ash in a wildfire. We stayed apart for 3 days, just long enough. On the 4th night, I went to the southern gallery as planned, alone, wearing a cloak with no crest. The message had been left anonymously, urging me to come if I wanted proof of betrayal. I waited in the dark, heart pounding, hidden blades strapped beneath my sleeve. The trap was set and she came. Lady Kestrel, cloaked and confident, lips curled in that familiar smirk. I knew you'd come, she said. You're more like your father than you think, hungry for your own piece of power. That's not what I want, I said. No, she asked. Then why are you still here, girl? Hoping to melt the Ice Queen with your tears. She'll never choose you over the crown. She already did. Kestrel blinked. And that's when the guards stepped from the shadows. Mara included. You're under arrest for treason against the crown of Wintercrest. Mara said calmly, You have the right to remain silent. I recommend you use it. Kestrel turned to me, rage blooming across her face. You think she'd keep you once this is over? She spat. You think you matter beyond this moment? I didn't flinch. No, I said. I know I matter now, and that's enough. She was dragged away, still cursing, still snarling. I stood there until the gallery was silent again. When I returned to our chambers, Lyra was waiting. She crossed the room in 2 steps and kissed me like she was taking her first breath after drowning. Never again, she said against my lips. Never again will I let them near you. It's over, I whispered. But we both knew that wasn't true. Not yet. One threat was gone, but others waited in the dark. And now they knew we weren't afraid. We'd exposed one enemy, but victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like silence before the next strike. Lady Kestrel's imprisonment shook the court, but it didn't stop the undercurrent of fear. If anything, it made it worse. Now, Everyone knew what we were capable of, what Kaya and I were willing to do to protect each other. That kind of loyalty wasn't seen as strength by the old guard. It was seen as threat. Our love, once whispered about as scandal, now became something else entirely. Power. And power always draws lines in blood. Mara warned us. Kestrel was never the head of the snake, she said, pacing the solar with a frown. She was sharp, but she wasn't the architect. There's something deeper here. A rot that's been growing since before your union. You think it's someone in the High Council? Kaya asked. Not just someone, Mara said. Several. Kaya's face remained composed, but I saw her hands. One clenched into a fist. The other trembled. That night, she didn't sleep. I woke to find her sitting by the window, wrapped in a furlined robe, eyes fixed on the snow-covered city below. I joined her in silence, wrapping my arms around her from behind. She leaned back into me finally and said, "They hate that I love you. They fear what it makes you." What does it make me? I kissed the side of her neck. Human, whole. She turned her head, caught my gaze. I don't know how to be whole. Not yet. Then I'll remind you every day. She kissed me slow and deep and full of everything we were too tired to say. For a while, the war in our heads quieted, but only for a while. The next morning, Mira brought more news. An intercepted letter written in code buried beneath mundane trade blogs. Once decoded, it read, "Strike during solstice. While hearts are soft, while her guard is down, solstice, 3 days away. The festival honoring the longest night of the year. Wintercrest's most sacred celebration. One where the palace would open its gates. Where nobles, citizens, and foreign dignitaries alike would walk the halls by torchlight. Where music and wine would drown suspicion. Where an attack would be expected least. We canceled the event," I said. "No," Kaya said firmly. "That's what they want to see us retreat, hide, bend." "So, what do we do?" I asked. She turned to me, steel in her eyes. "We give them a show. We give them the illusion of weakness, and then we bury them with it." The days leading up to solstice were a blur of planning and precision. The palace was decorated in silver, obsidian, and ice blue. Candles were lit in every corridor. Musicians rehearsed in the Great Hall. Every moment was orchestrated, not just for tradition, but for strategy. Mara's spies doubled. Guards were disguised as guests. Secret signals were established. And beneath it all, Kaya and I played our part. Rulers touched by myth, untouchable and serene. We smiled, laughed, danced in the outer courtyards as if nothing could reach us. But in private, we sharpened blades. On the night of the solstice, I wore white trimmed with black velvet, my hair pinned high with silver thorns. Kaya stood beside me in midnight, armor laced with glinting onyx, her crown set low on her brow. We looked like something out of legend, and maybe we were. The palace filled quickly. Nobles raised glasses. Citizens offered blessings. The halls flickered with firelight and song. For a moment, it almost felt real. This peace, this celebration, but then Mara found us. "They're here," she said. Southwest corridor. 2 figures in palace robes. One carrying a dagger soaked in death root. "They're not trying to assassinate," I said. Cold creeping into my chest. "They're trying to frame someone." "Yes," Mira confirmed. You froze. Her entire body tensed. "We end this now." The next moments moved like glass shattering in slow motion. Kaya and I moved through the corridors like we belonged to the stone itself. The traitors didn't see us coming. One was dressed in servant garb. The other wore the crest of House Thorn. My house, my blood. My cousin Thalen, I stepped forward before Kaya could. "Why?" I asked him. "Why come for her?" "Because she made you forget who you are," he said, voice trembling with belief. "You were meant to serve her house, not become her. The slap I gave him cracked like ice. You never knew me." Raised her hand and the guards closed in. But before they could reach him, Thalen drew the blade. "Not for me, for himself. Let the bloodline die with dignity," he said. Let the old ways be remembered. Mara moved fast, faster than I'd ever seen. The dagger never touched skin. He fell unconscious under a sedative dart seconds later. The other man was seized before he could scream. The entire scene lasted less than a minute, but when it ended, I couldn't breathe. Kaya turned to me. "Are you hurt?" "No," I whispered. "But I hate them. I hate them for making me doubt myself. For making me think I would ever be theirs again." She kept my face. "You're mine, but only because you choose to be. That's what terrifies the most." That night, we didn't return to the celebration. We stood on the tower balcony instead, watching the lights below flicker in the snow. I rested my head against her shoulder and whispered, "They'll keep coming." "Let them," she said. "They'll find us ready. Do you think we'll survive it?" She turned to me, eyes fierce. "No, I think we'll conquer it." And in that moment, with the wind tearing through our hair and our fingers locked like a promise, I believed her. Winter had buried Wintercrest in silence. The snow longer melted. The sky stayed gray for days at a time, heavy and expectant. It wasn't just the season. It was the stillness before something inevitable. Word of the solstice incident spread beyond the palace walls. First as rumor, then as weapon, the southern provinces whispered of instability. The eastern lords sent thinly veiled letters of concern. And my former house, the Thorns, issued an official statement, distancing themselves from Thalin's actions, but not condemning them. "They're watching," Caius said one night, pacing the council chamber as I sat by the hearth, waiting for cracks for weakness. "Then we show them neither," I said. She stopped, looked at me. "They'll try to break us apart." "Let them try." She crossed the room and knelt in front of me, her hands curling over mine. "I won't lose you." "Not to them. Not to anyone." "You won't," I whispered. "You already chose me. Now I choose you." Every day until the end. A week passed, then 2. And then the summons arrived. A message from the Triarch. An ancient body of 3 sovereign realms that sat beyond our borders. Neutral in name, but powerful in influence. They requested an audience. Not with Kaya, not with the crown. With us as a couple. They want to see if we're real, Kaya said, holding the parchment like it might burn her. If our rule is built on more than performance, then let them see. This isn't a negotiation, I test. If they don't believe us, if they think this bond is a facade for power, they'll declare the union illegitimate. They'll back the Thorns, or worse, the East. Then we don't give them doubt. I said we give them truth. The charged delegation arrived 3 days later. 3 envoys, one draped in white and gold, one in red and black, and one in a robe of pale green that shimmered like leaves. They moved through the palace with polite smiles and silent judgment. I could feel them weighing every word, every glance, every hesitation. Kaya and I did not flinch. We dined together, debated together, trained together in the courtyard until my arms ached and my cheeks burned from the wind. We shared stories of the solstice festival. We invited them to walk with us through the northern gardens, where the snow lay undisturbed and the silence spoke of peace that had been fought for. On the 5th night, they asked to speak to us separately. I was brought to the solar where the envoy in white sat waiting. "You weren't born for this," she said without preamble. "You weren't raised to rule." "No," I said, "but I was raised to survive. And then I chose to lead. Why her? Because she doesn't just wear the crown. She carries the cost of it. And she never asks me to be anything other than what I am." "Do you love her?" "Yes, enough to die for her." I didn't hesitate. "Yes, enough to live for her." That one caught me, but I said quieter. "Especially that." They didn't tell us their decision immediately. We waited 1 day, 2, 3, 3. And then, as Kaya and I sat in the war chamber reviewing reports of unrest near the eastern border, the envoy in green entered and placed a single parchment on the table. Sealed. I opened it. The words were few. "The bond is recognized. The union holds. Rule together and wisely." Kaya exhaled for the first time in days. I leaned back in my chair suddenly light and laughed. She looked at me stunned. You're laughing? We just convinced the most powerful neutral alliance in the known world that our love is real. I think that deserves a laugh. She stood cross to me and kissed me in front of the envoy, slow, deliberate, unhidden. The envoy only nodded. Let the realm learn from this. The next morning, the palace was filled with light. Not sun, just clarity. The court breathed differently. The halls held less fear. For once, no secrets hung in the air like poison. And then asked me to walk with her. We left the palace without guards, cloaks pulled tight, down into the lower city where frost glittered on every rooftop. The people stopped and stared, but not in fear. And all they bowed. Not because we demanded it, because they chose to. We reached the edge of the frozen lake, the same place she had once watched alone. When I was young, she said, I used to stand here and imagine drowning. Not because I wanted to die, but because it seemed easier than carrying what everyone wanted from me. I turned to her and now she looked at me. Now I imagine building something beside it. A school, a place where girls are taught to lead, to fight, to love. Then let's build it. She blinked as if surprised. You would? I already am, I said. Every day I'm at your side. I'm building a future none of them thought was possible. She kissed me then, hands on my face, mouth warm despite the snow. And when we broke apart, she whispered, I think I love you more than the crown. Then let's make the crown worthy of that love. But the peace didn't last. It never does. That night, Mira returned with a new message, one written in a cipher so old it hadn't been used in a generation. It bore no signature, just a symbol, a crown broken in two. What does it mean? I asked. Mira's voice was grim. It means someone else is coming. Someone older. Someone with a claim neither of you expected. Kaya's face went pale. My uncle, she said. The one who vanished after the last war. He's not dead. And if he returns with an army, I asked. Then we finish what was left undone years ago, she said, voice like steel together. And just like that, the final battle began to stir beneath the ice. We didn't speak his name aloud. Not yet. It hung between us like a ghost, like frost on glass before it breaks. Kaya hadn't seen her uncle since she was 16 when he vanished after the end of the border rebellion. Some said he was dead. Others whispered he was waiting, hiding in the outer aisles, licking old wounds and counting allies. Now we knew the truth. He had waited and he was done hiding. The morning after Mara delivered the ciphered warning, the Eastern Watchtower raised the black flag, a signal reserved for high-threat sightings at the edge of Wintercrest borders. Kaya and I rode out before the sun had fully risen, cloaks snapping in the wind. The frozen plains stretched wide around us, the kind of cold that pierced bone. But I was no longer afraid of the cold. I had chosen a life beside winter and found warmth in it. The soldier who met us at the outpost stood stiffly, frost in his brows. Your Majesty, he said to Kaya, then to me, Princess, show us, said, and he did. Across the horizon, half shrouded in morning fog, were ships, dozens, sails marked not with a crest, but a jagged symbol carved into the wood. A crown broken in two. He means to divide the realm, I said, my voice quiet. He means to take it, Kaya corrected. And if he's using old symbolism, it means he thinks the throne still belongs to him. How many men? Unknown. But they're not hiding. They want to be seen and the court's still unaware. For now, we return before midday. Kaya called a closed war council. Only her most trusted commanders, Mara and I. There was no room for politeness, only strategy. He'll attempt to land through the eastern fjords, General Rhea said, pointing to the map. It's the only place deep enough for ships of that size. Which means we control the fjords. I said, sink them before they reach land. We don't know how many civilians he's carrying. Barrow warned. He's smart. He'd use innocence to shield his core fleet. Then we isolate him another way. Kaya said, we make Wintercrest too united to fracture. If he comes to split us, we show him we cannot be broken. How? I asked. With words? I blinked. You mean to address the realm? Yes, she said together. That evening we stood on the balcony of the Great Hall. Below us the city had gathered. Torches lit the crowd like stars caught in glass. Kaya stepped forward first, voice carrying with the wind. You have heard the whispers, she said. A man who claims blood, who carries old grievances, is coming for your crown. She looked at me, then extended her hand. I stepped forward. But this realm is not ruled by blood alone. I said it is ruled by will, and our will is united. You have watched us fight for each other. Kaya said, now watch us fight for you. The crowd didn't cheer immediately. It was quiet at first. Still, then slowly, surely applause. Shouts a roar that rose like fire from frozen earth. They weren't just believing. They were choosing. That night, we received a message under our chamber door. No seal, just words. Hurried, scratched onto rough parchment. He has allies inside. You must not trust the North alone. Kaya read it once. Then again, her face darkened. Someone in the North is backing him. Who? It has to be one of the houses still loyal to the old regime. Someone who sees our rule as a stain. We need to move fast, I said. Before his ships land? We'll ride to the fjords at dawn, she said. We meet him at the border. We end this before it begins. You mean to face him yourself? Yes, but I'm coming with you. She looked at me like she might say no. Then instead she reached for my waist, pulled me close, and said, I don't know what I did before you. I don't know how I ruled in silence, but I'll never do it again. Then let's finish this together. We left before dawn, just the two of us, Mira and a company of Shadow Guard riders. It was a cold unlike any I'd known, bitter and biting. But I rode beside Kaya, her jaw set, her breath visible in the air, her presence of force that steadied everyone around her. The eastern fjords came into view by midday, and so did the ships. Dozens black sails, silver steel flashing in the light on the shore. Tents already stood. They had landed. He was already here. They moved faster than we thought, Mira said. We still hold the cliffs, replied. And he won't expect me to come to him. But I will. What do you mean? I asked. He's old guard. He still believes in parley and performance. If I approach under the old rites, he'll meet me. He'll want to gloat. It's too dangerous. Exactly. Which is why he won't expect me to bring you. I didn't flinch one now. We rode down before sunset. No weapons drawn, just banners raised. The old signal of diplomatic approach. His men watched us descend. Then one figure emerged, cloaked in black, hair silvered not with youth, but with time. He looked like Kaya but broken, hollow. When he saw her, he laughed. You came, he said. Of course he did. Always the performer. I came to tell you this ends now, she said. There is no throne for you here. There's no throne left at all, he said. Just a seat you're keeping warm for me. Then his eyes shifted to me. And this must be the wife, the distraction, the pre-leash they gave you. Kaya didn't blink. Say another word about her and I'll bury your body where no name dares be spoken. He smiled. There she is, the wolf beneath the frost. Leave now, she said. Take your ships. Take your shame and vanish again. Or I show you what a crown looks like when it's earned. The air between them was blade sharp. I felt it in my bones. This wasn't just a battle for land. It was a reckoning for history itself. You were never meant to rule, he said, and she was never meant to belong. And yet here we are, I said, stepping forward. Ruling and belonging. Funny how fate listens to women who refuse to kneel. He blinked. Just once, but it was enough. I saw it then, the crack in his belief. In the morning the war would begin. But that night we returned to our camp, firelight dancing on our skin. and I curled into Kaya's side and whispered, "We've already won the first battle." "Which one?" she asked. "The one that matters," I said. "The one where I chose you." "And you chose me." The battlefield was snow. No drums, no horns, no grand declarations. Just the cold and the quiet and the tension of thousands of hearts beating towards something irreversible. Dawn hadn't yet broken when the enemy advanced. Their soldiers moved like shadows across the frozen fjord. Armor dulled, banners hidden. But we saw them. We were ready. Kaya stood in full war regalia, her black armor traced with silver veins, her hair braided back with streaks of frost, her eyes colder than the blade sheathed at her hip. I had never seen her like this. Not notchable, not distant, but raw, real, alive. She was the storm, and I stood beside her, cloaked in white, the color of resolve, the color of defiance. I had no sword, but I had voice, and I had chosen my place. Not behind her, not beneath her, but at her side. "If this ends today," I said to her softly as the lines formed in the distance, "I want to die knowing I was yours." She turned to me and her hand found mine through the layers of fur and leather. "We're not dying today," she said. "We're changing everything." The plan was clear. Mara had orchestrated it with surgical precision. Our forces were split in three. One contingent held the cliffs, archers hidden among the trees. Another flanked from the west, waiting for the enemy to overextend. The third ours would meet them hidden. They'll try to drive straight through. Mara had said they'll think it's their easiest path that you're too proud to hide. Let them think it. Let them think it. That was the heart of our strategy. Let them think we're too soft, too in love, too exposed. Let them think our bond is weakness until it becomes the blade at their throat. When the first arrow flew, it didn't sing, it screamed. The air shattered with it. Then came the clash of steel on steel. Kaya led the charge herself, sword gleaming as she cut through the enemy's front line like a god forged from vengeance. I watched her move, efficient, merciless, exact. Every strike was justice. Every motion was reclamation. I didn't stay behind. I rode into the fray on a mare of dappled gray, flanked by Mira and her guard. I had no illusions. I wasn't trained for this. But I knew how to command and I knew how to lead. I shouted orders, rerouted forces, guided the archers from the cliff signals we had prearranged. I became the voice that carried through chaos. And still amid the chaos, I searched for her. My eyes always returned to the center of the storm, always till she bled. A gash along her shoulder, a bruise blooming beneath her jaw, but she didn't falter. Her uncle appeared before her like some monster from a forgotten age, cloaked in black, eyes wild with victory too soon assumed. "You always were too sentimental," he said, circling her. "This realm would have thrived under my rule. Order, fear, legacy. Legacy built on fear is dust," she said, raising her blade. "And I am not sentimental. I am in love," he snarled. "And that is why you'll fall." Their swords met in a clash that made the earth seem to groan beneath them. I couldn't reach them. Not yet. I was pinned between enemy reinforcements, our soldiers barely holding a line. But I saw them. I saw everything. And when Kaya faltered just a moment, just to slip from pain and blood loss, I screamed her name. She heard me. She turned. And that moment, when her eyes found mine, was enough. She moved differently after that, not faster, but clearer, as if her purpose had returned. The blade she drove into her uncle's chest was not just steel, it was truth. And when he fell to his knees, eyes wide with disbelief, Kaya stood over him and said, "The crown doesn't belong to those who inherit it. It belongs to those who earn it." Then she turned away. He bled out in silence. The moment he fell, their army broke as if some ancient magic had been tied to his will. And now, untethered, they collapsed. Some fled, others dropped their weapons. And when the snow settled, we were still standing, bloodied, bruised, breathing, alive. So Lyra found me minutes later. I was kneeling by a wounded soldier, pressing cloth to a thigh wound. She dropped beside me, dirt and blood on her face, and I reached for her like she was the only thing left in the world that mattered. Are you? I didn't get the words out. She kissed me right there in the snow with the dead around us and the living watching. She kissed me like it was the only truth left. And maybe it was. It's over, she whispered against my mouth. No, I whispered back. It's just beginning. That night, there were no celebrations, only fire, healing, silence. We walked the camp hand in hand, speaking to the wounded, honoring the fallen. And when we returned to our tent, there were no crowns, no titles, just her body against mine, her breath trembling as she let go for the first time for real. I almost lost you, she whispered. But you didn't, I said. You never will. She fell asleep with her head on my chest, one hand over my heart. I stayed awake until sunrise, listening to the quiet, not the silence of fear, not the stillness of waiting, but the hush of something holy, of something held. We had won, but more than that, we had endured. The war was over, but peace did not arrive like a song. It came slowly, uncertainly, like light breaking through storm clouds, faint, fractured, and fiercely earned. The snow didn't melt for weeks. The fjords still held the scars of blood and fire, and the palace returned to life, not with celebration, but with a quiet determination. Rebuilding had begun, and with it came the reckoning. The High Council assembled the day after we returned. Kaya wore no armor, just black silk and a crown that no longer seemed heavy. It looked natural, like it had finally settled into the hands of someone who was never meant to inherit, but had always been destined to lead. I stood beside her, hand entwined with hers, no longer afraid to be seen, no longer playing a part. What's left of the opposition has scattered, General Rhea reported. But there are whispers that some of the eastern houses may attempt to challenge your rule through diplomatic channels. They'll try to paint your actions as emotional, impulsive. Let them, Kia said. And when they do, we will answer not with justification, but with proof. What proof? Asked one of the older councilmen. Kaya turned to me, her fingers tightened, and then with a calm that shook the walls, she said, proof that strength and love are not opposites. That a realm built by two women who chose each other without compromise is not a weakness, but a future. I looked at the room, at the skeptical faces, the ones waiting to see if we would flinch. And I smiled. This isn't a transition, I said. It's a transformation. It's already begun. There were no arguments. Not this time. Some didn't applaud. Some never would. But none dared raise their voice against us. Not after what they had seen. Not after who we had become. That night, I found in the map room again, though there were no maps on the table now, just blank parchment and a single quill. You're quiet, I said. I'm thinking about what comes next. And she looked up at me, her eyes softer than I had ever seen them. I want to rewrite the law, make it so the throne can pass through choice, not blood, so no one can ever claim it by right of birth alone again. That will change everything. I know, then I'll help you. I walked around the table and sat beside her. She turned her face toward mine and I touched her cheek gently. You don't have to do it alone anymore, remember? I never could, she whispered. We spent the following weeks in motion, visiting the wounded, overseeing reconstruction, drafting laws that made the court flinch. Kaya granted land titles to commoners who had led resistance units. I appointed women, many from lower houses, to positions of influence. There were protests, of course, but they didn't last. We had turned our love into a living force, unstoppable, and people began to believe in it. Not as scandal, not as rebellion, but as truth. On the first day of thaw, Kaya took me by the hand and led me beyond the palace gates to a hill overlooking the lake. The same lake where she once stood and imagined disappearing. Now we stood there together, breath misting in the air, hands clasped. A structure was being built below, a low, wide building of stone and glass. The school! For the girls who were told to be quiet, she said, for the daughters who were told to marry power instead of becoming it, And for the women who dared love in places that told them not to, I added. Especially them. She turned to me and something lit in her eyes. A softness, yes, but also certainty. There's something I haven't asked you yet. You've asked me everything. I smiled. Not this. She stepped back, reached into the inside pocket of her cloak, and drew out a band. It was simple dark metal carved with a single word in Old Everick. Beloved, we were forced into marriage, she said. And we made it ours. But I want to ask you now freely, will you choose me again? Not as queen, not as duty, but as Kea, as the woman who didn't know how to love until you taught her? I didn't hesitate. I reached into my own cloak, pulled out a matching band I'd been hiding for days, and laughed through the tears rising in my throat. I thought I'd ask you the same thing. Her breath caught, she blinked fast. And then we both laughed, slipping the bands onto each other's fingers like the world hadn't almost broken. So it's official, I said. Now we're really wives. Now, she murmured, pulling me into a kiss. We're finally free. That night there were no formal celebrations, no crowns, no banners, just a fire in our chambers, a bottle of spiced wine, and the feeling of bare skin against bare skin. This time not as armor shed in exhaustion, but as a promise. I want a quiet life, she whispered as we lay tangled in warmth. With loud love, I whispered back. With mornings, she said, where I wake and don't have to remember how to pretend. With nights, I added, where you only speak the truth softly and only to me. With peace, she said, and with you, always with me, I replied. She looked at me and I saw it again. What I saw that first day behind her cold gaze. Not a weapon, not a ruler, a woman aching to be held and chosen. And now chosen, loved, never again alone. Outside, the frost began to melt. Inside, two women who had been enemies of tradition, survivors of duty, and makers of their own story finally slept without fear. But peace was not the end. It was the beginning of something deeper, something earned. Spring arrived not as a sudden bloom, but as a slow unraveling. The snow melted in layers. The ice cracked and receded from the lakes like a silhouette out after holding breath too long. The people of Wintercrest, too, began to thaw after years of fear, war, and silence. We had not only survived the winter, we had outlived it. And now we were something more than rulers. We were proof. It began with letters from young women in the provinces, from widows, from scholars and blacksmiths and children too bold to be afraid. They wrote to us not with requests, but with thanks. I thought I'd never see myself in power. I thought love was only allowed in secret. I thought we'd always be ruled by those who never once asked what we needed. They saw us now, and they believed in love, in strength, in possibility. Kaya held those letters like sacred things. She didn't cry, but I saw the way her breath caught when reading them, the way her shoulders dropped just slightly, as if something heavy had finally been set down. I did cry. I cried for the version of me that once stood at an altar in fear, thinking I was being handed off like a burden. I cried for the girl who once thought silence was survival. And I cried for the woman I had become, the one now standing beside a queen who looked at me like I had rewritten her blood into poetry. The school opened midsummer. Its gates were wide. No tests of bloodline. No titles required. Only curiosity, only courage. The courtyard was filled with girls from every corner of the realm. Some barefoot, some noble-born, all equal under the sun. What will we teach them? Kaya asked me as we stood on the balcony overlooking the opening ceremony. I smiled. Everything they told us we shouldn't know. And what will we ask in return? Only that they never shrink to fit a world that fears their shape. She nodded, and I saw it again in her profile. That mix of steel and softness, of war and wonder. That was Kaya, my wife, my sovereign, my home. There were more battles, of course. Not all wars are fought with swords. There were nobles who refused to bend, houses that dissolved rather than swear fealty to us. There were rumors spread across oceans, merchants who tried to sabotage trade routes, foreign kings who sent polite threats disguised as proposals. But we never faced them alone. We governed together. We stood side by side at every negotiation, every court hearing, every moment that tested our unity. And they watched us. Two women who had not been meant for thrones, but had taken them anyway. Not through conquest, but through conviction. 3 years passed. Then 4. The realm did not fall. It flourished. Peace held. Crops doubled. Trade expanded. The school grew. And then one morning, Kaya woke me with a whisper. "Come," she said. I blinked for my eyes. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I just want to show you something." She led me through the palace barefoot, past guards who bowed and didn't question us, through the eastern garden where the first wild roses had begun to bloom. She stopped beneath the stone archway of the old greenhouse, now renovated into a quiet observatory filled with glass walls and books and moonlight. On a small pedestal stood a sculpture I hadn't seen before, carved of dark iron, elegant and simple. 2 hands entwined. Around the base, a single line had been carved in old Everick, carefully chosen. I turned to her, my heart stumbling in my chest. "What is this?" "It's our legacy," she said. "No crowns, no titles, just choice." "You had this made for the school for the girls," I said softly. "So they remember we were real. We are real?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "And one day we won't be, but this will remain." I stepped into her embrace and held her, not like something delicate, but like something endless. "There's something else," she murmured into my hair. "Another secret?" I teased. "A request." I drew back, searching her face. "Anything? When I die, God's willing, many years from now, I want no title on my tomb," she said. "Just my name and yours together." "And what will the world think?" I asked. "Let them think whatever they like," she whispered. "But let the girls know. Once 2 women chose each other, and by doing so, changed everything." I kissed her like a promise, like a beginning because it was. Years slipped by. We ruled until our hair turned silver side by side. Until laughter rang through the palace halls louder than any debate. Until daughters of every lineage stood in council chambers, no longer questioning whether they had a place there. Until love was no longer something murmured in shadows, but written into law, woven into legend. And when we finally grew weary, we stepped down not in shame or failure, but with grace, with intention. We set the crown aside. We walked away, fingers intertwined. And in the tales told after us, they did not claim we were flawless. They did not pretend we ruled without error. But they said we ruled with hearts unbroken, with truths laid bare, with love unashamed. And they remembered our names, not because we commanded it, but because at last they had learned how to choose.